Hi, this is Ofori. I'm the digital reader, and this video is going to be about the books I acquired in April and also the books I read in April. I used to make two videos, but I'm combining the two videos because I've drastically cut back on the number of books I've acquired. I kind of give myself this new cap where I can only acquire half as many books rounded up as I read the previous month. So in March I read 4 books, which means in April I acquired 2 books. Now there's actually 3 I'm going to talk about, as Amazon has a bonus reads plan, and at the beginning of every month they give you about 4 or 5 books and you can get 2 of them free. And next month it's a completely different set of books. So a lot of the books they have really aren't to my taste, but if there is one, I'll pick it up, and I don't count that in my books to acquire, because if I don't pick it up at the beginning of the month, then it's done and I won't be able to acquire it next month unless I pay for it. So I'm just adding that as an extra. So to start out, the book I did pick up with Amazon Reads for April was The Bootlegger's Daughter. And The Bootlegger's Daughter is basically about 2 women whose lives collide at the beginning of Prohibition. One is pushed into bootlegging for various life reasons, and the other is a young female cop going through everything that would occur to a young female police officer in the early mid-20s who's trying to make a name for herself, and both their lives collide. I don't pick up that it's a romance or anything, but looked interesting to me to read, looked like an interesting story, so I figured I'd check it out. The next book that I picked up in April is Agatha Christie, A Life from Beginning to End. This is put out by a group called Hourly History, and it is basically a brief history of Agatha Christie. The reason I bought this book is because I was so dissatisfied with Agatha Christie, A Mysterious Life, which really was like the first biography I had read in about 35 years. I don't know if all biographies are like that, but I'll talk about that book in a minute. But I really disliked it, and I was so unsatisfied with the chronicling of her life story that I was just like, maybe I just need to read something that's quick, to the point, and talks about her life from beginning to end without a whole bunch of extras. So I picked this one up so I could check it out. And the third book I got was the Mahabharata, A Modern Rendering. I picked up a book a couple months ago that was supposed to be an alternate take on the Mahabharata called The Palace of Illusions. And it was supposed to be a take on the Mahabharata from a female's point of view. So I got that book, and last month I was actually getting ready to crack it open and read it, and I realized all of the other alternate takes on mythology that I've read the original story. And that really gave me a good context to what I liked or didn't like about the new take on it. For the Mahabharata, I had no idea what it was to begin with, and I had no idea what the original story was. I found out that it is a long epic poem, and in reading about it, I felt like it's not in me to read a 8-book long epic poem, but I looked at a couple different authors and sites, and one that really stood out to me was the Mahabharata, A Modern Rendering. And basically what this author does is he basically takes it and kind of focuses on the story and the tales, whereas the normal Mahabharata has a lot of stuff about philosophy and religion and life advice and stuff like that that's also built into it, kind of like the Bible. But he kind of just boils it down to the story. It's still long. It's 2 books that equal 1,500 pages. So he didn't cut out too much, but he just really boiled it down to the story, and he also did it in a prose way. So I figured I want to read that first to kind of get an idea of what the story is, and then when I read Palace of Illusion, I have a better understanding. Considering its length, I wrote a video about it, but I'll probably be reading this for the rest of May. And so those are the books that I picked up in April. And so now I guess I'll talk about the books I read. And the first book I'm going to kind of touch on is Agatha Christie, A Mysterious Life. And this was a biography of Agatha Christie by Lord Thompson. And I hated this book. Hated. First thing, this book is 500 pages. And I felt like it was 300 pages too long. Repeatedly throughout this book, the author reminds us that Agatha Christie says that her books that she wrote are not a secret reflection of her life. But throughout this book, this author basically takes excerpts and characters from the story and basically acts like they have significance in Agatha Christie's life. Well, her cousin, her sister is like this character, and her husband is like this character, and her sister says this, and this character says this, which we think her sister would say. So she really tries to build a narrative of Agatha Christie's life through all of her books. And the narrative of Agatha Christie's life really just gets lost in this person being, I guess the best way I can put it is over scholarly. I think this person knows a ton about Agatha Christie. I think this person knows a ton about her books and was very anxious to prove it rather than just telling Agatha Christie's life from beginning to end. She just really tried to come up with all these extra insights that I felt were really forced and really muddied the picture of Agatha Christie's life. Very often when I was reading this book, she would talk a page or two about a character, about a person, and I'd be like, who is this? And then I realized that the person was a character from one of Agatha Christie's books and not a real life person in Agatha Christie's life. So I don't know. I hope all biographies aren't like this, but I was not a fan of this. My goal is to get through all books because I'm doing these videos and I want to talk about them. But this was a book I was like, nah, son, I couldn't recommend this to anybody who wanted a biography of Agatha Christie unless that person was super scholarly and really wanted to try to make a connection between Agatha Christie's writings and her life to show that her life correlated to the books that she wrote. But if you just want to know Agatha Christie's life and what she did, this isn't the book. It also made me realize Agatha Christie, I don't know other way to put this, but boy, she just had the life of this boring white woman. I hate to put it like this, but let me just give you an example. Throughout this book, the author talks about Agatha Christie and her financial struggles and how she grew up, with money, and then she lost the money, and all this time she's trying to make it seem like Agatha Christie don't got any money. But throughout the book, she has maids, she has servants, she has nannies, she has all of these things throughout the book, and she is a very classist person, at least the way it's portrayed in this biography. And I was just like, my gosh, she's not a person who I would be friends with in real life. And all the talk by the biographer about her struggles, I was just like, really? I wish I could struggle so that during my time of poverty, I only had a nanny, one servant in my life, in my household. So once again, this is a book for me that when I'm going to rate this book, it's getting 1 star. So the next book I read was Hollow of Fear. And Hollow Affair is a continuation of the Lady Sherlock series. And in this book, what she's doing is her love interest, Lord Ingram, he was in a loveless marriage through the first 2 books. And it was kind of one of those things where, what would have happened if they had him and Lady Sherlock gotten together. But anyway, he was in a loveless marriage. In this book, his wife turns up dead, and he is being blamed for it. And it's Lady Sherlock's job to, through several hijinks, find out the truth of what happened. So this book, I love. This book was full steam ahead with Lady Sherlock. I like the romance part. I'm a person, when I read my romances, I'm not a big cheesecake person. I don't want to know whose hand was where on whose thigh. I don't want to know, where their lips were on what part of body. I'm the kind of person, I'm like a old 1940s movie person. I'm the kind of person where when you embrace and kiss, I want to cut to the next chapter, and all of the sexual congress has occurred between the 2 chapters that I just read, and I don't have to get a play-by-play of what's going on. This book I loved. I am really enjoying the Lady Sherlock series, and this book is really, to me, kind of like the first 2 books were good. This book kind of puts it all together and is just really full speed if this is the kind of stuff you're into. And I'm sorry, well, not sorry, but I'm telling you, this book is going to get 5 stars. So the next book I read was Soulless by Gail Carriger. And this book I knew it was urban fantasy, and it's Victorian urban fantasy, werewolves, vampires, ladies who have special abilities and all that kind of stuff. And basically, the way in this world, the soul is kind of correlated to almost what your magical, and in this book, the soul is a very important thing in here. Basically, if a vampire tries to turn you into a vampire, the amount of soul that you have dictates how successful that will be. If a werewolf tries to turn you, the amount of soul dictates how important that will be. And there are certain people who have no soul, and those people basically can cancel magical abilities. And the main female character in this book is one of those people without soul. And her love interest is a werewolf who is the head of like this magical enforcement agency. And so this book is about the adventures that she's having, and then their connection and the things that are going on plot-wise. I definitely like this book. When I first started reading it, I thought it was a little bit fluffy. I thought it was, well, to be honest, it isn't greatly written, but I was okay with that by the time I got to the middle of the book. This book, I kind of feel like there's wine and there's Kool-Aid, and there's room for both in the world. And this book was Kool-Aid. I enjoyed it. I don't think I would recommend it to anybody. This is the kind of book where if you were stuck in an airport for 12 hours and you had read all your books and you went to the gift shop and this was there and you picked it up, you'd be happy you picked it up. You'd be happy it gave you some enjoyment over the time when you didn't have anything. But once you got home, I don't think it's a book you'd follow up on. I don't think you'd be like, oh, I got to find out more about this character. This first book was good. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't really like, I'm dying to know more about this story. So this is the book I enjoyed. It's almost kind of like a guilty pleasure. There are more books to the series. I don't know if I really feel like I need to read more books. One of the things for me at least. This book got a little bit raunchy and cheesecakey. Not rated X-wise, but once again, for me, when they're talking about somebody's hands and where they are and what their lips are doing, I don't need to all know all that stuff. If y'all are in love, in the invisible pages of the book, you do what you need to do, and then you come back afterwards. I'm happy. But once again, definitely this was a book I enjoyed. Maybe if I get through my list, or sometime way in the future, if I see it on sale or something, I might pick up the second book in the series, but I don't really think so. And if somebody asked me to pick a good urban fantasy book, this would be way down on my list. But it's not bad. So this is a book, considering, like I said, it surprised me in that I thought it was going to be bad, and I ended up kind of enjoying it. So I'm going to give this a good 3 stars for sure. The next book I read was Maurice Leblanc's Arsene Lupin, the Gentleman Burglar. And this, I read a lot of older books. I'm a Gutenberg hoe. I'm always going into Gutenberg and pulling stuff out. So when I read this book, I kind of also going through my library. And like I said, I have a ton of books in my library. And so sometimes I'll just go to the bottom of my library as far as books I acquired, and that could be 10 years ago, and just see what I have there. So this was in my back history in my library. And so I started to read this book, and I read a lot of older books, and sometimes they just don't hold up. They don't hold up being a little bit racially blind, or they don't hold up because they're very poorly written, or they don't hold up because they're terribly hard to read and they just don't flow. This book held up surprisingly well. I really enjoyed this book. This kind of book is kind of broken down into different stories in the chapter, kind of adventures in each chapter. And some of the chapters were a little flat, but some were really good. This is the original Gentleman Rogue. So if anybody is reading Locke Lamora, if anybody is reading Stainless Steel Rat, if anybody's reading any of these guys who are these gentleman rogues, this is the OG Gentleman Rogue book. And I would definitely recommend you read it, because some of the stories are very good. Some aren't that great, but on the whole, but they're not that great, mainly just because the stories aren't as interesting to me, or they get a little bit convoluted. But on the whole, I really enjoyed this book. This is a book I would recommend, especially to somebody who is into rogues and thieves and that kind of thing, because this is the OG, and it holds up particularly well to modern writing. So this book, I'm going to give it 4 stars. The next book I read was Robert Asprin, Phule's Company. I was a little bit surprised by this book, because this book came out in 1990, and now there's this big hubbub about cozy books, cozy fantasies, fantasies are really the big thing. But this book is absolutely, when you read this book, there is no doubt this is a cozy science fiction book. Incredibly low stakes. It's about the process of taking something that's disorganized and disassembled, and I have the train next to me, something that's disorganized and disassembled, and putting it together into something that you can be proud of. It's about friendships and relationships, although there's not really any romance in it. It is just very cozy, and this is 1990, so I think there's a lot of these cozy books out there that people just kind of sleep on a little bit, because the modern books have kind of taken everything by storm. Basically, what this is about is about Willard Phule, who is a multimillionaire who is in the Legion, the Galactic Legion. And the Galactic Legion is kind of like a place, it's like the Foreign Legion of today. It's a place where ragtag people come, nobody asks about their past, and it is a military arm. So basically, he does some things that get him in trouble, and his punishment is to be sent to this ragtag company of misfits with the hope that he will be so frustrated by these people that he will quit. And the rest of the story, as I often say, the hijinks ensue, but it's a cozy fantasy, so you can imagine that when he goes to this ragtag company, that friendships and relationships happen, and things turn a tide and that kind of thing. But I really enjoyed this book. Definitely going to be reading the other books in the series, but I was definitely surprised by just how the stakes were so low in this book, but I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process of things being improved and all the stuff that you typically enjoy in a cozy fantasy book. This, to me, is another 4-star book. So that's it. I acquired 3 books, and those 3 books were Bootlegger's Daughter, The Mahabharata, A Modern Rendering, and Agatha Christie, A Life from Beginning to End. And the books I read were Phule's Company, Arsene Lupin, Gentleman Burglar, Soulless, Agatha Christie, A Mysterious Life, and The Hollow of Fear. This is Ophory Murray, the digital reader, and keep reading.